After 2.5 years of war, bloodshed, this war has finally seen horizontal escalation, which means that the scope and the geographical width of the war has expanded. Ladies and gentlemen, what the Russians will do right now is try to disrupt lines of communication and supply. When the Nazi army, the German army during the Second World War invaded Russia, this is exactly what happened. All that the Russians needed to do, and which they did, was they kept on moving back. They kept on moving back. They allowed the invaders to come in. It is very likely, and I can bet money on this, that Zelensky is going to make this point to Prime Minister Modi. Jai Hind, friends. I'm Major Gaurav Arya and you're watching the Chanakya Dialogues English. Like this video, subscribe to our channel, don't forget to press the bell icon. Now, here's the news on 6th of August, and you've heard this before. Today is basically an analysis piece, ladies and gentlemen. On 6th of August, 2024, Ukraine launched its largest cross-border attack on Russian soil since World War II, capturing over 80 settlements and 1,150 square kilometers in Russia's Kursk region. Now, why did the Ukrainians do this? What was the motivation to do this? I'll come to that later. First, I'm going to give you a few headlines so you understand, and where does Prime Minister Modi fit into all of this? Now, you'll say, Major, the Russians attacked the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians have managed an ingress into Russian territory. Where is the Modi factor coming in? I'll explain all of that to you a little bit later. The Ukrainian Air Force has successfully targeted and demolished a second strategic bridge spanning the Siem River in Russia. You know, the Kursk region, they have destroyed it. The bridge is the third one destroyed after Kiev damaged the first bridge 16 kilometers northwest of the main battle zone in Kursk in late August, and the second one in Zavno. Now, it's important to note that the bridge was the last major crossing in the region, and its destruction means that the Russian forces will struggle to get supplies and reinforcements in an area about 700 square kilometers. Friends, I'd like you to know, and I will tell you this of the Russians and of the Ukrainians, easier to capture territory. Easier to capture territory. I'm not saying easy, I'm saying easier as compared to. Easier to capture territory, more difficult to maintain your hold in that territory, and horribly and terribly difficult to maintain lines of communication and supply. And this whole game that we're talking about today is a game not just of attack, not just of defense, not just of tanks and missiles and aircraft and, you know, what have you. It is essentially a game of logistics and communication. And whoever aces this game wins the war. So after Ukraine damaged these bridges, you know, we're talking about bridges, Russian units on the southern side of the river will now be dependent on pontoon bridges, which are vulnerable to Ukrainian attacks. You know, pontoon bridges are essentially fudgy kind of bridges. I know them to be military bridges because that is what we used in the army, and these are essentially floating bridges. In its latest assessment, Washington-based think tank, the Institute for the Study of War, said that Russian forces have likely deployed or redeployed more than 5,000 personnel to Kursk to counteract or counter Ukrainian troops. All this is being done by the Ukraine as part of the broader strategy to disrupt Russian supply lines and hinder their military operations in the region. So what happens is, it is actually about pressure and counter pressure, ladies and gentlemen. So what happens is that, you see, if you see that Russians have occupied a certain part of Ukrainian territory, right? Now, Ukraine has been fighting a war there for almost 2.5 years, and they haven't got much. Suddenly, Ukraine decides, hey, hold on, let us shift the area. So this, I've been saying for a very long time, and look at my old videos, I'm saying that this war has not seen horizontal escalation. This is what I have said so far, and I've always maintained that this war has not seen horizontal escalation. Well, it just has. After 2.5 years of war, bloodshed, this war has finally seen horizontal escalation, which means that the scope and the geographical width of the war has expanded. This move could alter the course of the conflict, ramp up pressure on Moscow, and show Ukraine's capability for deep operations inside Russia. However, holding on to these gains deep inside Russian territory could be risky. As I said, Ukraine's supply lines, already stretched thin, would be vulnerable to Russian counterattacks, and any setbacks could lead to significant losses. Now, here is what Russia will do. Ladies and gentlemen, what the Russians will do right now is try to disrupt lines of communication and supply. You remember at the beginning of this video, I had already said that the person who will win is the person who can maintain lines of communication and supply. Now, how will the Russians do it? It could be an air attack, right? It could be an air attack. It could be sustained artillery strike. It could be commando operations. It could be special forces operations. Russia could send its famous, Spetsnaz, special forces. So what could happen, ladies and gentlemen, in this regard is, I've already mentioned that whoever can maintain and manage lines of communication and supply, that side is going to win this war. Now, what the Russians will do is try to degrade and denude this angle of the Ukrainian army, right? It could be done through aircraft. It could be done through fighter aircraft. It could be done through artillery strikes. It could also be done through their famous special forces. They call them Spetsnaz. So, for example, a convoy is coming, carrying a lot of critical material. It could be ammunition, it could be arms, it could be new weapons, it could be something that the Americans have sent. Let's say they are getting them to the border. This could be intercepted by Russian special forces. All these games are now going to start. Now, President Zelensky's aide, Mikhail Podolyak, I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly, said that now we have things on our own terms. We have absolutely no plans to beg. Please sit down to negotiate, right? We have proven effective means of coercion. On the other hand, President Putin vowed to use new technical solutions and a strong response to push the Ukrainian forces out of Russian territory. Has Zelensky walked into Putin's trap? The Russian state media portrays Ukraine's Kursk incursion as a trap set by Putin, suggesting it could ultimately benefit Russia. As I said, ladies and gentlemen, this entire thing is nothing but a game of communication and supply, right? The more thinly you stretch your lines of supply, the more thinly you stretch your lines of, this has been done before in Russia, and this game is not new to Russia. When Napoleon's armies, the French army, invaded Russia, this is exactly what happened. When the Nazi army, the German army during the Second World War invaded Russia, this is exactly what happened. All that the Russians needed to do, and which they did, was they kept on moving back. They kept on moving back. They allowed the invaders to come in. They said, you come in, there is no problem, keep on coming in. And then somebody asked, the Russians have a joke. When somebody asks that, who's your strongest general? They say, our strongest general is General Winter. Our strongest general is General Winter. Keep drawing the Ukrainian forces inside, keep drawing them, and Zelensky is going to force his generals to take more and more of Russian territory because he thinks that by doing that, he will have a better negotiating tool. That, you have taken this many square kilometers of my territory, I have taken these many square kilometers of your territory, and therefore now let's negotiate. This is what's going on in Zelensky's mind. He's essentially a politician. But that is not how military tactics work. The more you capture the enemy's territory, the more money, the more bandwidth you've got to spend in order to maintain it. The more troops you need, the more communication and supply you need. Kremlin's aligned outlets like the RIA, Novosti and Tsargrad have claimed that Ukrainian forces fell into a trap and suffered heavy losses. The long-term impact of Ukraine's Kursk incursion is uncertain but could be significant, and this has embarrassed Russia and shifted the war narrative. By taking the fight into Russia, Ukraine has shown it can act offensively beyond its borders, potentially altering strategic calculations for Russia and its Western allies. However, there are risks. In the middle of all this, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi is set to visit Poland and Ukraine between August 21st and 23rd. On his visit to Ukraine, Prime Minister Modi is most likely, he's going there most likely with this entire thought of peace. And let me tell you one more thing. It is very likely, and I can bet money on this, that Zelensky is going to make this point to Prime Minister Modi. He's going to say that, Prime Minister Modi, today we also have Russian territory under our control. And if Russia wants our territory back, what it needs to do is stop the war and give back our territory. Today, as of today, Ukraine finally has something that it can negotiate with Russia with, Before that, it was just trying to build up world opinion and fighting against the Russians. Today, they actually have land. You cannot negotiate for land without land. So today, Ukrainians have Russian land and the Russians have Ukrainian land. And this is where the negotiations will start. Thank you very much for watching this video, ladies and gentlemen. And if you like this video, press the like button. Subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to press the bell icon. Jai Hind, Vande Mataram, Bharat Mata Ki Jai.